If you guys know what OpenTable is, it's one of the companies where you can actually reserve his table. If you guys ever been to the restaurant, ever reserved a table for your boys, you know that OpenTable is very popular, right? Many restaurants use OpenTable so you can reserve and actually get a seat once you get there. So OpenTable has a lot of data on restaurants, right? Obviously, in very populated areas like Chicago and San Francisco, New York City, OpenTable is very popular. On a Friday night, on a Saturday night, restaurants are usually very booked and they're very packed. So people do reserve restaurants like a few days in advance. So OpenTable has a lot of data on restaurants. And OpenTable is pretty much saying that reservations for many of the San Francisco restaurants and Chicago restaurants are being hit by the hardest. If you check this out, in 2022, OpenTable found that the amount of people making reservations online or by phone or even just walk-ins was down 41% from 2019, which is pre-pandemic. And this actually lines up very perfectly to the next number I want to show you. The next number actually says that many business owners in San Francisco are saying that some of their restaurants are down 50% in sales, which lines up really well with the OpenTable number, saying that the amount of people making reservations are down 41%. That's almost 50%. So not a lot of people making reservations, and many of these high-end restaurants, especially ones in the Mission, are taking a massive beating. The Mission is very famous because they have a lot of bars, a lot of clubs, and a lot of really good high-end restaurants. Like, you can't really find a bad restaurant or a cafe in the Mission. Many of these are renowned. They got thousands of reviews. And before the pandemic, people actually fight teeth and nail to just get a place at the Mission. Like Valencia Street, back before the pandemic, you'll never find a single vacant storefront. Now, if you go to Valencia Street, you're seeing a bunch of vacant storefronts, and it's not good at all. And many of these restaurants, like I said before, are very popular, they're very hip, and they're very unique. They're run by small communities and just small family business owners, and they do really well. Like during the pandemic, business was always booming. You always see lines, but now the lines are gone. It just seems like people just don't want to come here anymore. Chicago really isn't that bad, considering that it's a 26% drop in reservations compared to before the pandemic. San Francisco is by far the worst. Of all the cities in the US, people say Seattle is bad, they say LA is bad, they even say Chicago is bad, which I agree. Chicago is pretty bad, I've been there. But San Francisco is a whole different animal. When you lose 150,000 office employees, and if you also lose stuff like 41% reservations, it's not great at all for the city. And this actually comes in when massive Castro District Italian restaurant just closed out of the blue for no reason. And many people are saying that it's probably because of the business that's happening at this Castro location. Just a few months ago, a lot of the Castro District merchants and even residents actually came out and protest of unhoused encampments right outside their businesses. Now here's the thing, I'm all for helping the homeless and people who are in need on the streets, but there's also need to be a line to be drawn as well. Obviously, they're living on the streets because the city just isn't doing as much. You know, San Francisco has been doing so much. They spend so much money on homelessness. They spent so much money on homeless shelters, but there's still a bunch of people homeless in this whole street. Like, the city never really does any sort of big, renovations or any big plans. They just constantly put little band-aids on the situation and the problems, and it never gets well. So look at this. He says that there's a person, walking down the street of Market Street. They don't want to walk down that street anymore. This is the reason why the IKEA store that opened on Market Street has no business, because nobody wants to walk through Market Street because there's literally just homeless encampments and just people doing fentanyl everywhere. And you would be shocked that you could just have an open air drug market in one of the most populated tourist streets. Yeah, in San Francisco, nobody cares. The cops can't do anything. And this is why so many people are moving to places like Las Vegas and Miami, because you don't see this kind of stuff. You could open a business in peace and not be feared that, oh, maybe the next day it'll be like 10 different encampments. And in San Francisco, it's crazy because you can't actually move these encampments. Okay, there's even like little laws here and there where you can't actually move them. So guess what happens when you open a restaurant? Let's say you open a restaurant here in the Mission, and the next day you see like 3 tents outside. Well, you know that customers aren't going to come. You call the city council, they can't do anything. You call the cops, they can't do anything. And it's just screwed. And that business eventually shuts down. San Francisco loses tax revenue from that business. And imagine that on an insanely big scale. A scale so big that it doesn't just affect small business owners, but also big corporations like Salesforce downgrading their office, Charles Schwab downgrading the office, people moving online because the situation in the city is getting so bad. And even Amazon Go and Whole Foods had to close down in the Mission District because of this whole situation. Like Market Street, it's not great at all, right? That's where the malls are closing down. That's where the Whole Foods and Amazon are closing down. And you do see what I'm talking about here. The Castro District, these restaurants are slowly closing down. Not because they're closing down because they want to, but they kind of have to. They can't make any money. We're in this capitalist market. And when you have restaurant owners saying that sales are down 50% because of crime, drugs, and low tourism, well, you're going to be having some insanely big changes to change things up. I don't know what to say. San Francisco is such a great place. The location's fantastic. It already has everything going for it. Tech companies are already headquartered here. I feel like if they just do things a little bit normally, maybe a little bit more rationally, I think many companies will be willing to get employees back. One of the biggest reasons why I've heard is people don't want to bring employees back is after the pandemic, like in 2021, 2022, big corporations and employees and managers stick their noses into San Francisco. They see all sorts of craziness. Like, it feels like the moment these officers are gone, the whole entire city gets taken over by, like, drug use and homeless encampments. And then afterwards, people were like, you know what? I'm not coming back. I'm not going to commute 1 or 2 hours every day just to work in this environment. And also, you have the rise of remote work. I think with San Francisco being at such a rock bottom is actually encouraging more companies to go to the remote work situation. So many people are living outside of San Francisco in cheaper parts of the Bay Area and nicer parts. And many people are just leaving California altogether and going somewhere else. Airbnb and Salesforce and several other companies have remote work, and they even say you can work anywhere you want, right? There's companies that make you do remote work at certain locations, but many of them, especially the tech guys, just let you work wherever you want, however you want, as long as you get the stuff done. And it's a win-win for everyone, and everyone saves money, and everyone likes it. And San Francisco is saying that these crime, drugs, and abuse and low tourism are destroying the business. Even Chinese tourists are avoiding San Francisco. Whereas back in 2019, Chinese tourists spent $500 million in the city. $500 million just from Chinese tourists alone back in 2019. And I'm sure those restaurants will absolutely love that. But guess what happens now? If you go to some of the Chinese blocking sites and you go to like the Chinese TikTok, you know what they say? San Francisco is just not the place to be. They pretty much say it's probably one of the worst American cities to go to because of like the intensive crime, drugs, and just homeless encampments everywhere. I mean, there's still a lot of Chinese tourists going to New York City, Las Vegas, and even LA. But San Francisco, they avoid that like the plague. And look at this, you even got many of these restaurants slowly closing down. A vegan Mexican restaurant owner is saying that San Francisco has truly deteriorated to an all-time low. And this is a restaurant that's been in San Francisco's Mission District for 16 years, and they finally closed down. That is very, very sad, right? Imagine staying in this area, going through all sorts of crazy years in San Francisco, but it's just this year, it's just so bad. So many people aren't coming back. So many tourists aren't coming back. And like I said before, people are saying every single week, there's always some restaurant or cafe or bar in the Mission closing down. And we're going to be seeing more of these foreclosures. And it's really frightening. Thanks for watching, guys. Comment below and subscribe for more news.